WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Dublin. From having spent the weekend chatting with Ravens fans and Hall of Famers and Ravens alums, and this guy at various baseball games from Ohio to Pittsburgh's and Yins and that, we welcome Luke Jones back on after another successful mission to the Hall of Fame, where the Ravens put another player into the Hall of Fame, and it looks like it's going to be a little bit of a line of this, right? I mean, the Ed Reeds, and who knows about Sizzle and Marshall Yonda down the line and Ozzie down the line. But this was the weekend everyone was sort of pointed to for the last 15 years. And I really feel like for someone that got on a bus like you did, we did, went out there and came back and watched Lamar Jackson run around in between, it was a pretty satisfying little experience for me. I got to be honest with you, Luke.
I think so. I mean, what more could you have wanted? I think for someone, regardless of how you feel about Ray Lewis post-playing career, which, we've heard him say some goofy things, a couple years ago threw Joe Flacco under the bus. But I think if you can put that part aside, and if you can, I mean, I question why you do all this, because no one brought Ravens fans more joy than Ray Lewis did over the better part of 17 years. I mean,
and no one has portrayed him to be a saint other than himself.
Sure. And I mean, that's part of it. And certainly, you can get into to some of the off-field stuff and everything. But at the same time,
I think he means well.
Sure. But I think at the same time, if you just were focused on celebrating the football player over the weekend,
no doubt.
I mean, how much more fun can you have? I mean, you saw him do the dance. I mean, my goodness, he did the dance with Jonathan Ogden at one point as kind of the halftime of his speech that went over 30 minutes. And it was just a great celebration in that way. I mean, if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan and you don't recognize Ray Lewis as kind of the alpha and the face of the franchise to this day, regardless of what you feel about him as a talker, as kind of this post-playing career version of him, where you can argue that he's gotten a little parody-like maybe in some of his speeches and things like that, but it was fun, and it was a great gathering of Ravens fans. I think probably being in Canton and just kind of surveying the scene, maybe the Eagles were the only team that topped the Ravens in terms of fan representation, but I think it was close, and certainly the Ravens were very well represented in terms of fans, in terms of current and former players, in terms of current and former coaches. So many members of the organization, former and current, there to support Ray Lewis. And in that way, when you're talking about a franchise that is just a little over 2 decades old, what a celebration of what this franchise has accomplished here in Baltimore. And again, that starts with number 52.
Well, yeah, it's the root of everything. And it didn't take me going to Canton to figure that out last week. I mean, we've been talking about that all along. I found it fascinating to see what was contained in the speech, what wasn't contained in the speech, and just the fact that it really wasn't a speech, it was a sermon, and it really wasn't prepared. It was, he got out there and winged it, so to speak, right? I mean, it was just sort of this free form, and obviously taking the microphone like a TED Talk, kind of, sort of, right? Instead of up at the podium, a unique speech that he gave, a unique way. I didn't love the speech, and I know we're running it here on the radio and whatever, but I give the speech a solid 6.5. I wanted more from that, but my expectation level going into the weekend, what I thought I was going to get was a 6.5, and I got a 6.5. I was hoping for an 8 or a 9, but Brian Dawkins gave me that instead.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, first of all, I think overall, and I would be disingenuous if I tried to say that I sit there and watch induction week, the induction ceremony every single year.
Oh, wow, you don't?
I do, but I don't.
See, I do.
I can't say that I'm sitting there watching guys that that I'd never
I know,
watched
Curly
play.
Culp. You don't want to see a speech from somebody you don't know, kind of.
Right. I mean, was I aware of Robert Brazil? Sure. But in the past, would he have been someone whose speech I would have been tuning into at 7:15, knowing that the players that I watched weren't going to go on for another 2 hours? Probably not. So from that standpoint, I just wanted to make that clear. But I thought all of these speeches in their own unique ways, and they were delivered in different ways. Some were more comfortable, and then you had others like Brian Urlacher, who was clearly nervous, but I think all of them did a nice job. Now, I thought Dawkins was kind of head and shoulders above the rest, but I thought Urlacher's was really good. I love Jerry Kramer's. I mean, my goodness, you and I have sat down with Jerry Kramer at how many Radio Rows over the year at this.
And I've heard a couple of those stories in front of me, right, about Lombardi and all that, and about teamwork and about, Jerry Kramer has given many, many speeches in Green Bay, all over the world, in Idaho, right, as being the Lombardi guy. He came out and delivered the speech that he gives about his career that I think he's given many. He's had a lot of chance to rehearse that. You know what I mean? Like, there's been 40 years for him to perfect what he would ever say if they voted him into the Hall of Fame. And I feel like, I give him a 9.5 for his speech because I thought there was no one saw Jerry Kramer play that's under the age of 60. Right? I'm 50, and, it came 8-10 years before my time, right? So to see him give a speech, to put it all into perspective as an 82-year-old man, that's a winner for me. I think Ray Lewis's speech will not be memorable in any other way other than the TED Talk thing. I didn't feel that way about it. I think the Brian Dawkins thing brought me to the edge, and I'll always remember that. I really will. I don't even remember what Ray said in half the speech. It was the other day, quite frankly.
Well, you use the Joe Flacco line and say, well, 90% of the time he didn't know what he was talking about.
It didn't resonate in that way because, and I feel, Ray does things the way Ray wants to do them, and Ray did it the way Ray wants to do it, and Ray's Ray. But I really do wish he had consulted someone, you know what I mean, about here are the 10 structures of what I want to get into, the one speech where the whole world's paying attention, because the world doesn't pay attention to Ray Lewis anymore. No bigger Ray Lewis fan than me. What does Brandon Stokely say about Peyton Manning, the house that Peyton built? Everything in my career Ray Lewis built. If Ray Lewis was Lawrence Phillips and John Ogden was whatever, I don't know, name some other Ricky Dudley from the first round or whatever, right? This franchise would have been 5-11, and there would have been no Brian Billick and the whole trajectory of everything for my life and the city. And if you love the Ravens and your life sitting up in whatever section you sit in and whatever PSL, man, that would have dissipated pretty quickly if this team would have come in here and been the latter-day Jaguars, Cardinals, no Ray dance, no great players, no great memories, no Super Bowl in Tampa. All of that would have been taken away. So I have great respect for that. That being said, I wanted more out of his speech. I want more for his post-career than I'm getting or that I'm seeing. And he's in my living room, in my home, in my, you can follow him. He Facebooks from his car. I'm just sort of tuned out. I guess it's sort of like young people don't see ads on the internet. When Ray Lewis stands up to speak, I might give it a couple minutes of my time, but I want it to resonate. And I thought as a player, Luke, he was better at that. I think there were times at the locker when he was talking about an opponent or talking about X's and O's or talking about what makes a quarterback great or what makes a running back great, where I really felt like he could explain things. And I think ESPN paid him a lot of money to go do that, and then they didn't want it anymore. Now it's on Fox Sports. So I think he's trying to think of a band these days that's oversaturated or a song. We've all been there with Phil Collins or Huey Lewis in the News or Hootie and the Blowfish, where you just get worn out. I'm worn out on Adele, and I like Adele, but with Ray Lewis, I just thought this would have been something structured, measured, well thought out, and I guess that's the difference on the Kramer thing, right? And where Ray Lewis is, and then the in-between of Dawkins. I don't know that Dawkins took that stage and was going to tell the stories about, how dark his life had been. I don't know that he had all of that absolutely. I think that was sort of, I might say it, I might not, and I think he got led into it, and I think it made his speech special and memorable, and it made me glad I was there for it, even though I hate the Eagles fans.
Sure.
And all over again, by the way. I gave them 5 minutes, the Eagles fans. You're back on the list, all of you. You know who I are.
Right. But I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree really. I'd say this. I think what Ray Lewis, everything that you just said to describe Ray Lewis is not something that's atypical even for a lot of great former players around the league and around, across professional sports. I mean, there are very few that remain as relevant when their career is over as when they played. And, I mean, it's very difficult to do, first of all.
Only Tony Romo can do that.
And think about it. The thing that resonated with Ray was his passion on the field. I mean, Jerome Bettis was interviewed right before Ray went on stage, as part of kind of the TV production side of the enshrinement ceremony. And the thing that resonated with him was that Ray had this insane ability to elevate the passion and drive of his teammates on the field to get them to play the same way as him, basically. And we know it wasn't exactly the same because you're talking about one of the greatest players of all time. But he got all of those guys to buy into that. And when you're playing, I think that's not an easy thing to do, but it's easier to do that. But then you take that same passion off the field, and it's not always going to translate in the same way. And that's why you see him with a wireless mic. He's sweating through the jacket. There's certainly passion there. I don't deny that, but does it translate in the same exact way? I don't know, and I think that's tough. And I'll say this much: I don't need everyone that gives a speech as a Hall of Fame inductee to hit a home run. I mean, some guys are going to have something really special to say, something really unique to say, and they're going to deliver it in a very powerful way. You mentioned Brian Dawkins talking about his battles with depression, admitting that he contemplated and even thought out how he would kill himself, and talked about how that would leave his family money. And talked about those dark days. He had the wonderful moment where he presented his wife with the gold shawl, the cover up, whatever you want to call it, as kind of the way to enshrine her as a Hall of Fame wife. I mean, that's gold right there. And but that speech isn't as special if everyone's giving that same powerful, impassioned speech. So, in the way that you talked about Ray's speech, it was very similar to what I expected. I didn't want Ray to go up there and embarrass himself, and I thought it could have been a lot worse. It could have been better. Certainly, I would have liked to have seen him mention a few people that he didn't make any mention of. Brian Billick, Marvin Lewis, which I was really surprised about that. He didn't make mention of Terrell Suggs, as far as I could tell, over the course of, 33 minutes. So
that would be my biggest fear, is giving a speech like that and not having some sort of list, giving a speech of all the things going on in my life and not thanking you somehow or, or somebody. You know what I mean? I don't know. That would be very disconcerting to me, he's had 10 years to come up with a speech, and I thought the speech was not much better or not much worse than anything you'd see if you went out and saw him and he showed up at a boys club or a YMCA. I guess you get the same thing, but there was nothing special about his speech, and that surprised me. I thought, given the amount of homework he did as a football player, this is the last time many, many, many people are ever going to pay attention to him. And I know he thinks he's more important than probably people outside of Baltimore thinks he is. But there were people waiting not just for acknowledgement of Atlanta, which he actually did, or all the columns written about the victims from that incident being in Ohio. And I just thought over the span of the career, for all that he accomplished, dude, he's the greatest 10 years from now, we'll go back there, and he will be getting treated like Jim Brown as a football player. I believe that. And I think Lawrence Taylor sort of has that amongst some people, but he's also a guy that now is no longer taken seriously. But at that time when I was doing television with Lawrence Taylor 20 years ago, and he had just stepped off the field, he had just gotten his gold jacket, all that stuff, he was going to be Jim Brown. Part of being Jim Brown is like showing up and being Jim Brown. That's Jim Brown's Jim Brown 50 years later, because Jim Brown has made himself relevant. Good, bad, different, bad ways for sure, but there's a relevant part of this that if he is going to affect the world positively, and my city, dude, you don't even live here. I mean, come on. I mean, and that offends me a little bit. But there's all of that The audience, the lead on SportsCenter, the waking up on Sunday, the saying something that would make a difference. I don't feel like any of that happened on Saturday night, and I'm a little disappointed by that.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't expect it. I always expect more from Ray, right? That's part of being Ray.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
But that's also separating Ray Lewis, the football player, from Ray Lewis, the human being. And that applies to any of us, by the way. That applies to Luke Jones, who's talking on the radio right now, compared to Luke Jones, the human being who interacts with his family and friends and just everything other than his profession.
Sure.
So that applies to all of us. I mean, the one thing I'd say is, how many former players are really that relevant? I mean, Joe Montana might be the greatest quarterback of all time. I never hear about Joe Montana doing anything. And by the way, that's not a bad thing either. I'm just saying.
Well, relevant happens when you're Alan Page or you're Steve Largent or you're, you move on. I would even say Michael Strahan.
Every player is my point.
Michael Strahan has a voice, huge voice daily and I think Ray wanted to be a voice. Ray wants to make a difference in the world, and now that he's off the football field, the only thing he has is giving speeches and showing up and kissing babies and shaking hands and signing autographs and taking pictures. I mean, that's that or his voice, his message, and I know he wants it to be important, and I feel bad that he's become a cartoon character because I think he could have more to contribute than that. And I thought when you get the stage of the world for 33 minutes or as long as you wish on a Saturday night, going back to the tried and true and giving the win one for the Gipper speech, I don't know. It was a stock Ray Lewis speech that I feel like I'll be able to get any time, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, but at the same time, if anyone's legacy is defined by giving a 30-minute speech, I'm not. But I'm just saying, seriously, everything you say as far as making an impact isn't done by making a 30-minute speech. I mean,
no doubt.
Okay, can you inspire people? Can you compel people to action in that? Sure. But, I mean, I don't know what Ray's doing with his life behind the scenes at this point. I know for
I saw his kids on stage. He's got a busy life, dude, right? I mean, he always has.
But I do know, and this is even from talking to people in the organization over the years, there are plenty of good things, good deeds that Ray has done in his over the course of his career and now post-playing career that hasn't been broadcasted. Have there been other things that have been publicized? Sure. Yeah, I mean, Ray
Lewis has done nice things for me. I mean, I could sit here and tell you about a kid that got hit by a car, and I went down in 1999, 2000, whatever, and I said, I need a football. He grabbed it, handed it to me, signed it to me, praying for that boy, give it to, I mean, Ray's been, yeah. I'm not anti-Ray. I mean, believe me.
Sure.
I mean, you've listened to me on the radio for 23 years. The speech was a 6.5. I was hoping for an 8 or better. I was hoping for something that I would come back today, and I'd circle it and say, we have to talk about this part the way we've already talked about Dawkins, the way we've already talked about Jerry Kramer. Parts that I will remember. Brian Billick always says this to me. Brian and I, sometimes we get around and we go to some motivational this or some business that. Brian gives these speeches, right? And Brian always says, if you go for a weekend to a seminar and you come back and there's a sentence you remember and something you can use that a week, a month, a year from now that helps your life, then that's what you pick up out of it, right? So, this is not the first motivational speech. Hell, I'm locking myself with Tony Robbins in a room in December for a week walking on fire. So, I'm used to this. I'm a good student. I was in a student role on Saturday night learning about the history of the game, the history of the player, what makes them tick, what matters to them, how they feel about things, reflection, big picture, all of that stuff. And, I was just a little disappointed, that's all. I wanted Ray Lewis, the speech, to supersede Ray Lewis, the dancer, the preacher, the football player, the tackler, the linebacker, the teammate. I wanted the speech to be that good, and for me it wasn't. That's all.
And that's fair. And, again,
I was pulling for Ray.
I'm not going to sit here and say that Ray's speech I thought was the best or my favorite of the night. But at the same time, I appreciate an attempt to address issues beyond football, even if it wasn't done in the most eloquent way per se. So there was some of that, and
I think the love message was great, but I think
sure. I mean, is it something that that's unique or you haven't heard that before from Ray? No, but that doesn't mean that message doesn't still have some value. So in that way, I thought it was fine.
By the way, I was standing at the locker when they lost, after the Cundiff kick. Let's go out of here and put a smile on somebody's face. And people made fun of that the next day. That wasn't who I was, but I had a sense of what he was trying to do there, what he was trying to say there, that it is bigger than, it's just a football game to some degree, right?
That was, it's funny you mention that, because that's honestly, for as many times as we've seen the impassioned pregame speeches or, the NFL films, post-game locker room scenes, that was actually one of those that really did resonate with me.
I'm still talking about it 10 years later, right? 9 years later, right?
So I thought it was fine in the sense that it wasn't the worst Hall of Fame speech ever.
No.
It wasn't the best Hall of Fame speech
one of the more unique Hall of Fame speeches. It was
definitely unique. At one point I quipped that Gary Williams thought Ray Lewis was sweating a lot.
And I know you wanted visual effects. You wanted fire to raise. You wanted organ music.
It would have been great to have some fireworks and some pyrotechnics and all that. But no, other than leaving out some of the names that we mentioned, and look, for all we know, Ray Lewis had a private moment with Marvin Lewis after the fact, before the fact, whatever. But for all we know, he had a moment with Brian Billick or with Terrell Suggs or whoever you want to point out that he didn't acknowledge or didn't acknowledge enough. And if he did, that holds far more weight, I would imagine, with those individuals. But yeah, you never want to leave anyone out. The reality is, I'm sure every single one of those inductees, including Terrell Owens down in Chattanooga, I think probably when they were finished, there was one person that they left out at some point in time. And in the case of Brian Urlacher, it might have been some high school teacher that he didn't think about until after he had already written and delivered his speech. You're always going to have someone or a few people that you could mention that you leave out or you have to draw the line somewhere. But in the case of Ray, it would have been nice to see him mention a few of the names that we mentioned. Marvin Lewis, who he started building a relationship with before he was even drafted. Brian Billick, certainly. Terrell Suggs, I was really surprised about Suggs. My goodness, he played a decade with him. So in that way, yeah, the speech was a little lacking, but the overall message of love and doing unity and things like that, that was fine. Was it anything that was life-altering as far as being so inspired or so blown away by it? No, I can't say that, but for any Ravens fans who wanted to hear from number 52 and in the old football context and see that passion and feel that passion, from that standpoint, I thought it was fine. So, again, I don't go into a Hall of Fame induction ceremony expecting every single speech to blow me away. I thought every single speech had its own charm and quality in different ways. Overall, I thought it was a really good night in that regard.
Absolutely. He is Luke Jones, Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at King Discount Lakers. Get the King a ring lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. They're in Rosedale. I stopped by to see Johnny Bev last week, but I got there too early in the day. Does he have to come after lunch for Johnny Bev for the wine? So get on over there and see Paul King. Tell him we said hello. Also, Amici's of Little Italy. I haven't had any meatballs from Amici's in about 3 weeks. I got to get over there, get my Pane Rotundo going. High Street in Little Italy. You're downtown. Maybe you're going to a ball game later in the summer. Maybe you're just down at the harbor enjoying the summer. Amici's of Little Italy has been our home there. That's sort of my Fonzie office over there in Little Italy. Luke, last thing on the actual Ray Lewis part of this. I think we could talk more about all sorts of aspects of the weekend, including our trip, including these other Hall of Famers. I know we're going to get to some Raven stuff as well. We've been playing the Ray Lewis speech, but the bust itself, the bust is unto itself a bust, right? It looks like Warren Moon. It looks like Billy D. Williams. It looks like Walter Payton's bad statue. At least it doesn't look like Brandy Chastain's statue, but I was mortified by that. I guess the memorable part of the entire night or the weekend for me, other than the Dawkins stuff and running into friends and personal stuff, but I'm talking about the production, the unveiling of his bust and the HD vision of it up in that stadium, and I looked at it and I went, who's that? And I think at the same moment I'm thinking, is this an optical illusion, or am I the only one that thinks that looks nothing like Ray Lewis? And then the internet got involved, and I think the internet has absolutely unequivocally. I haven't found one person that says you're nuts. That looks like Ray Lewis. I had a couple people that says, well, maybe a little bit around the eyes, but that's about it.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
It's been pretty universally panned in that way. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. It was funny because you and I spent a total of about 7 hours on the bus coming home on Sunday between going from Cleveland to Pittsburgh for the Pirates game and then driving home from Pittsburgh. And I was looking at it for a while, and it was almost like one of those magic eye type things.
Oh, yeah, you stare at it.
I looked at it long enough, and I started thinking that it actually looked like him. And I'm like, okay, maybe this isn't quite as bad as we're all making it out to be. And then I came back to it probably about an hour later. I'm like,
said, who's that?
No, it doesn't look like him. I don't know. I mean, I've been through the Hall of Fame. I've looked at the busts of all the inductees. I think so many of them are really well done. But I can also remember looking at some over the years where that doesn't really look like.
Well, Johnny Unitas hated his, right? And John Zeman famously, they recommissioned. They did one for Baltimore, all that. I guess that's what you do when you hate it. I mean, Walter Payton's looks nothing like him. I mean, there's a whole bunch of guys that you could say that about. But,
and some of them are great. Some of them, it looks exactly like them.
I agree. I mean, I think John Elway looks like he's going to jump out and bite you, literally.
Yeah. I think I thought Jonathan Ogden's was pretty good. I thought that one was that captured the essence of what J.O. looks like. So I don't even know who to criticize on that other than just the sculptor, I guess. But it was definitely, and you could even see when they unveiled it, and a few people commented on this. And I'll be honest, I didn't get a chance to go back and watch them pull the curtain off of the bust. But some people even commented that Ray reacted a little bit like, "Oh,
who the hell's that?"
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Does that make it more memorable? Probably, because 10 years from now we wouldn't be talking about, what a great bust. What a great depiction of Ray Lewis. The only time you talk about those things is when it doesn't look like them. So I would say it definitely left something to be desired, and that's probably the kindest way that you could put it. But hey,
well, that's the fallout. There's two things, right? There's the speech and what the bust looks like. I mean, and whether the jacket fits or whether you.
Put it this way: the speech was better than the bust. I think that's a pretty safe statement to say. And the other thing
the bust is a 1 on a 1 to 10. 10% might look like Ray Lewis if you stare at it and, or visiting a place with a green cross somewhere on York Road, I guess, So.
Yeah. I mean, unless if it gave him a hairstyle he never had or something like that, I guess that would have to be a 1. This is a 2. I mean, it definitely, like I kind of talked myself into it at one point that it wasn't so bad, but when I came back to it, I'm like, nope, that doesn't look like Ray. And some people have said Warren Moon. I heard, a couple other football players mixed in there. I saw someone say it looked like one of the Wayans brothers.
it looks like Tay Diggs. It looks like Lou Gossett. It looks like Billy D. Williams. So, it looks like a very attractive, middle-aged, African-American man. It just doesn't look like Ray Lewis. It looks like Warren Moon, honestly. I mean, the first thing I saw was I see Warren Moon and I see Walter Payton in there somewhere. That's what I see.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's in that way, it's definitely disappointing in that way, but hey, I guess it's better to have a bad bust in Canton rather than not have one. I'm sure if Jerry Kramer heard us talking right now, I'd be like, they could have put a bust that was a stick figure of me if it meant I got in Canton five decades ago. So I guess with that perspective, you kind of just shrug your shoulders and move on. But that definitely, that was one of those immediate viral reactions that really spread like wildfire. That. Yeah, the bust didn't look.
It didn't take long. Yeah, I mean, we all have eyes here, and we're watching it. Luke Jones can be found, Baltimore Luke, at Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. We are back from Canton. We're back on the beat here. We're going to be talking some baseball this week, certainly with the Ravens and the Rams this week, and a game on Thursday night. Fake football for all of us. I get to figure out how not to use my PSL tickets. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Appreciate all the reading of Dear Orioles. Appreciate all the information I'm getting back and forth here out on social media, as well as the 150 folks who went out to Canton, Ohio with us this weekend and had a pretty good time despite it all. We are in the midst of talking all things Pro Football Hall of Fame and an incredible weekend for Ravens fans, I think for Ray Lewis, for the organization, and now it's time for real football in the fake sense. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. We're also out in the Buy a Toyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships directly to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Also, the Maryland Jockey Club with the Laurel Park entries coming up for this weekend's racing down in Laurel. Get into the air condition down there, go bet the ponies, and enjoy that fantastic, sleek new sports bar that they've made for you and racing fans down in Laurel. Last but never least, any breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be back on Thursday this week to recap all of his Ray Lewis thoughts, get you ready for some fake football downtown on Thursday night. It is the SSV on WNST Heard Thursdays from 3 until 5. Want to give a shout-out to two of our new sponsors here this summer, Sporticulture. Get on up there. What a colorful website. All sorts of stuff up there for any college team or pro team. But for Ravens fans, it's 50% off when you use the WNST code at Sporticulture. We'll be telling you more about that. Also, our friends at Charles Newsonoff and Sons. My man Sydney getting it done over there. And he was all over my Facebook on Saturday night as well, having some fun. Charles Newsonoff and Sons since 1923. That means 1, 2, 3. 4 years from now, we're going to be celebrating a 100th anniversary. They've been in the business since then. You can find them out at charlesnewsonoff.com. You'll hear Sydney here telling you more about all the great work they do to make jewelry even more beautiful, make it fit better in my wife's case. So thank you, Sydney, and thanks to the folks at Charles Newsonoff and charlesnewsonoff.com. I want to get you out to the website where they have all that good stuff. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. We're going to continue this football conversation and maybe even slide a little baseball in. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.